Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Get Ready News. I am Mark Lindsted. This is my brother Dave Lindsted, and we're here to talk about things we see in the news and where we might find them in the Bible. Sometimes we hope to at least give you the Jewish perspective, and of course, every time the Christian perspective. Today we have a few articles that my brother has sent over to me that we'd like to just go over and look at for a little bit to take a deeper dive into what this really means and where we might find it in the Bible. And Dave, the first article you sent me was this one here where it says, the British military think tank warns of dangerous decade.
Absolutely. This plays directly into Bible prophecy and things that are going to happen in the future. One of the other things I notice is not only are military people and think tank people seeing something's coming, but also regular people are coming to me and say, I feel like the end of the world's coming. I feel like we're drawing to a close here.
Yeah, well, in that verse you're talking about in Matthew talks about wars and rumors of wars, and definitely this is a warning of a dangerous decade. I'd say that qualifies for sure as a rumor of war. Not only that, we think about the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel, and I don't remember, I think there was 110 actual armed conflicts happening right now.
It's just amazing at the unrest in society today. In fact, in Matthew 24, it says that it'll be nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. I find the Bible fascinating. Whenever it talks prophecy, it is so specific to two things, and it tells you exactly what's going to happen. By seeing nation against nation, that means a country against a country. So we would say, like, maybe Ukraine against Russia or United States against Canada. Mm-hmm. It would be country to country. Mm-hmm. But kingdom versus kingdom is actually infighting, civil war.
Oh, yeah. Well, January 6th, maybe.
That could be considered kingdom against kingdom.
And wow, to see that these boiling points of a lot of nations are really kind of there right now.
Absolutely. There is so much unrest, and people are just at the brink of whatever. Yeah. I mean, we see the insanity of the Hamas that came across the line and the horrible things they did to Israel. Yeah. And then we look at the reaction of Israel back to that, and they're reacting in a way that we would react if it was us.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me to see Israel reacting and saying, we're trying to make it for our citizens to be safe. And now the world is kind of turning on them.
Absolutely.
And that's really strange. In fact, that was the next article you sent me. It says, support for Israel has dropped dramatically among young U.S. evangelicals.
Not only just for the war, for the war effort that's going on, but this also dropped across the board.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this plays into a replacement theology, where we think that Israel is no longer part of God's plan. Which is really not what the Bible teaches at all.
Well, I think that the 144,000, that's Israel. That's not Gentiles. That's not us. It's interesting, though, that some people, they come to me before and have told me that, man, Mark, you support everything Israel does.
Yeah.
Well, no, not necessarily. I support Israel as a nation. I support them the way God wants me to. I think we should be their allies. I think we should support them. But that doesn't mean I support every single thing the Israeli government does.
Absolutely. These are just men. And it won't be until the 7-year tribulation comes that Israel's going to realize that they made a mistake and that they crucified their own Messiah.
Yeah. Well, as we look at these situations, as we see support dramatically dropping, especially amongst the young, I think the next article you sent plays right into that. And we see that this picture of Soros over at the World Economic Forum, which is, my goodness, if you want to tattoo New World Order on anything, just do that. But it says here he buys the second largest radio group.
Exactly. Whoever controls the media, whoever controls the flow of information, and we saw this just during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe about it doesn't matter, but you saw information being controlled at a level at a government level, and you couldn't put out any other information at all.
Well, I noticed that there's trials going on right now about how much control and manipulation there was, but that's not aired on public television. That's aired on one channel only, where you see they're dragging these things out, showing where the U.S. government came and said, I want you to suppress this comment, I want you to suppress this idea, and take care of it. And that really changes how people see things.
Absolutely. We even talked about Operation Mockingbird, which was a government-funded way to get the word out to the media and for them to regurgitate whatever the government said. I think you were telling me about a video you saw.
Yeah. The video says it has the local news anchors coming in with their stated words for the beginning. But if you put every, like, I don't remember how many it was, 50 or 60 news channels on the same screen playing the same words at the exact same time, they repeat it completely word for word what the government basically told them to say.
Basically all talking in unison with the same exact verbiage.
Well, I can't help but think of like 1984, where even then at that time the government in this book goes back and says, "Oh, we said something wrong in history. Go back and change the headline so no one can find it."
But this ought to make a lot of people nervous. George Soros, his money and his thoughts about the world push the world into certain directions.
Yeah.
We think about the district attorneys and people that he's promoted their campaigns to get these people in places in government, and they really are causing a problem. Not only is he doing that, but now he owns the second largest media conglomerate.
Yeah. Well, if you think he's an older man and going to get out of the way, well, his son just started his own foundation that Daddy gave him $10 billion for, and he says, if you think my dad is political, wait till you see what I'm going to do.
Exactly. It ought to make us all kind of worry and watch ourselves and just keep an eye open and be watchmen on the wall.
Yeah, well, and definitely get your media from more than one place, or a place that's trustworthy, that's giving you biblical reasons why they believe and see what they see. Well, here's another headline you sent over to me. It says 6 pro-life activists face up to 10 years in prison for protest outside an abortion clinic in Tennessee.
Yeah.
This isn't Romania or the USSR or China. This is in Tennessee.
This is supposed to be First Amendment, freedom-loving country we are, and here we are arresting people for handing out tracts and pamphlets. And I think they were accused of violating the FACE Act.
Yeah.
Where you're not supposed to block anybody's way in, but they were handing out tracts and stuff as they were walking in.
Yeah, well, the FACE Act is something about access to clinics, and I think Bill Clinton signed that in 1994, but it's never been used this way, but now they're going to use it this way, and can you imagine 10 years in prison? And I think you even brought up that there was a lady who was praying silently.
Yeah, this happened in Britain. There was a lady and an Anglican priest that were standing outside of a abortion clinic, and she was praying inside, and she was, praying for the people going in, and the police officer comes up to her and says, "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you this, and understand you don't have to answer." And he says, "Were you praying?" And she says, "Well, I may have been praying on the inside." And they took and handcuffed her and took her to jail. And I think it's been dismissed since then, but it's happening. It's starting to happen.
Well, that throws me straight back to the book 1984 when the thought police, he says, I got to get out of the way of the I can't remember what they called it, telegram, kaleidoscope, whatever it was, because it can read my mind. And if they know I'm thinking this, they're going to come get me.
What hits me is I think of Isaiah 5:20. Woe unto those that say good is evil and evil is good. And today we already starting to see that.
Yeah.
If you're what most people would say a normal family, if you don't have anything different in it, then you're bad.
Yeah.
And the ones that were considered bad at a time are now considered good.
Yeah.
Just like this, these people are considered bad.
Yeah.
And good is bad now.
Well, we see things like the apostate church, which is a sign for the tribulation coming. And we see even some of these churches, like I watched a video just the other day. I didn't know this happened, but during the Super Bowl, there was a church, I think it's called Crossroads, that had a Super Bowl message. And in their message, she kicked the Bible like a football.
Oh.
And then, she then, as the pastor of the church, began. And then they had a halftime show with music from like Usher and Miley Cyrus and in their church. So we can see this progression toward the end times. We see the apostate church, and like you say, woe unto those who call evil good and good evil.
Yeah. Not anymore. Church is just a fun time. It's just another social time. It's another time to be a star in a rock band.
Yeah, I always call it check the box church.
I'm not against people, having instruments and singing and having a good time worshiping God, but when you do it for yourself,
Yeah.
and it's the focus of everything, there's a problem.
Yeah. Well, speaking of signs for the end times, we see this next article that I brought talking about the red heifers. Talk about a sign for the end times. Now, the Bible doesn't say that they're going to have, shall be a sign of the end time that the red heifers will be here. But there's a reason why we believe the red heifers are a sign for the end times.
Exactly. In Daniel 9:27, it talks about that when the Antichrist will come and confirm a treaty with Israel, not necessarily made the treaty, but at least confirm it and back it up and give it some validity. It says after halfway through, he's going to stop the sacrifices and the offerings or oblations, that he's going to stop that.
Yeah.
And so in order for that to happen, in order for there to be sacrifices, something has to happen. And my thought is it needs to be a temple. In order to have a temple, you've got to have the red heifers to purify the priest to even work in the temple.
Yeah, and that's where the red heifers come into. We start looking at, okay, for him to stop it, they first got to start it.
Exactly.
And to first got to start it, you got to purify the Sanhedrin. So we see these heifers over there, and actually the man who owns these, Byron Stinson, is actually a good friend of ours. He has 5 red heifers over there, and sometimes people ask me, Mark, why is it 5 red heifers? Really simple. There is an embargo, I think it's called, between Israel and the U.S. You're not allowed to take livestock to the U.S.
To Israel.
To Israel. But you could take pets.
Yeah.
And the maximum amount of pets you can have is 5. So Byron has 5 pet cows.
That's using the old brain there, isn't it?
And I think 4 of these still qualify.
Yep.
And from what I understand, his group has even secured a place on the Mount of Olives because this sacrifice doesn't take place on the Temple Mount.
Right, outside the
They can't be on the Temple Mount until they're purified. So this happens outside of the city.
Yes.
So they're going to do it on the Mount of Olives. They're going to get the ashes together so they can purify the Sanhedrin so the Sanhedrin can begin their sacrificing. It's really interesting. The red heifers aren't a new story.
No.
In fact, with our family, the red heifers aren't a new story.
Exactly.
This is a picture of our uncle, Dr. Lindsted, and he's actually looking at a cow from the 80s, and she was thought to have been qualified, and of course she became disqualified.
Right.
But we see here on the other side of this picture, we see a guy named Vendel Jones, who's actually a good friend of our uncle. In fact, Dr. Lindsted dug with him in the caves in Qumran.
How exciting.
And there was this kind of commotion about this man digging for these artifacts, and he was looking specifically for the ashes of the red heifer. And the Hollywood movie rights came and said, this is an interesting thing. We want to write a movie about it. So they made Indiana Jones. But the problem was they said, nobody's going to know what the ashes of the red heifer are, so let's change it. They changed it to?
The Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant.
The next best thing in their mind, the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah. So it's not a news story about the red heifers, but it certainly is one that we need to pay attention to. And I was looking at this, and we see a couple of articles here. Hamas, get this right, Hamas cites the importance of these red heifers as a reason why they have attacked Israel on October 7th.
The thought is that whoever has the ashes of the red heifer is going to control the Temple Mount. And I believe that's because right now, even if Israel were to put a temple on the Temple Mount, nobody's ready to occupy and fulfill any office in it.
Yeah.
They would have to be purified first. Well, here's the first step.
Yeah, first step to get purified. In fact, when we get to a slide about the Temple Mount, I'll show you something really interesting, I think, about the Temple Mount. But we see that even the Muslims are saying, man, we got to watch out for these red heifers because this is leaning legitimacy to their claim on the Temple Mount.
Exactly. Now, the Muslims, especially the Shiites, believe that there's going to be what they call the 12th Mahdi, which will be one of their Mahdis is going to come back to life, and he's going to be the Antichrist, and they actually call him an Antichrist.
Yeah.
And all this plays into this place, to this Temple Mount, to the temple.
And that's amazing you say that because I heard the other day a guy from Islam was saying that this 12th Mahdi was going to reign for a period of 7. An Antichrist reigning for a period of 7. Wait a minute, where are we? Well, we're living in the latter days, I'm certain of it. And we look here, even the Hebrew, even the Jewish media now is saying that these Christians are just bringing these red heifers to give us to bring about the Antichrist, to push along the end times. What do you think about that?
That's an amazing statement to think that Christians would push to bring the Antichrist. If anything, we're looking for Christ's return, not the Antichrist.
Yeah.
But I think this goes back to the way that the Muslims, especially the Shiite Muslims, are. And their thought is that the 12th Mahdi won't come until there is mass destruction and there is mass chaos. And so in their idea, in their minds, if we cause the mass chaos and cause this, it will cause the Mahdi to come. Just like I think they believe we are causing God to do something.
Yeah. Well, and to think for narcissistic man to think we can control God, let alone, I mean, we already think we can control the temperature of our planet. I mean, okay, when I was a kid, I remember acid rain.
Yeah.
Acid rain was going to kill everything. We need to tax people to get rid of acid rain. I'm not sure how the money got rid of acid rain, but supposedly it just went away overnight. There's no more acid rain. Well, now we need money to control the temperature. Please explain to me how money can control temperature. I don't understand this one bit. Remember the ozone. Yeah. You got to quit using spray cans. You're killing the ozone layer. Then we find out that it's a seasonal change in the ozone layer.
You know, it baffles me that whenever someone uses the word science behind something, and then a few years later you find out that the science wasn't really exactly what they thought it was.
Well, I don't trust anybody when they look at me and say the science is settled.
Yeah.
Because the science is not ever settled. You're supposed to be inquisitive all the time in science.
Exactly. And science is a study to find out the truth.
Yeah.
Whichever way the truth takes you, not to a preconceived idea.
Yeah. Well, we see here that the Temple Mount, as we were talking about before, what I wanted to show you here, and in fact, there's a little time clock up in the corner there, and Dr. Lindsted has really talked about this at length, and I think it's important. I think it's a great visual image of what we look at. We think of the stopwatch or the time clock of God, and you would think of the hour hand as being Israel, and you kind of keep an eye on that, but the hour hand moves kind of slow.
Yep. Takes its time.
The minute hand would be the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Moves a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Pay attention a little closer to Jerusalem. Something might happen. But really the second hand, the thing that you're going to see that's going to start the everything happening is the Temple Mount. So the Temple Mount would be the second hand, and you got to keep an eye on that.
Exactly. I think this is where everything's going to start, and where everything culminates in the end is right here at this spot.
Yeah. Well, and earlier you talked about building a third temple.
Yep.
They're going to need to build sacrifices. They're going to need to build a temple. Well, I'm one of those that think that they may not even build a temple right away. In fact, I think they'll pitch a tabernacle.
Well, they're going to have to tear down that Dome of the Rock to do this?
Well, that's been a thought for many years. Everyone says, oh, you got to blow up the Dome of the Rock so that you can build your temple. And I think that they're wrong, because Jewish text and Jewish history says that the East Gate lines up with the Holy of Holies. If you look at this picture, the East Gate is not lined up with the temple with the Dome of the Rock.
Not at all.
There's a little cupola off to the side, and if you go into the rabbis' tunnels, we've been to Israel several times, and this is one of the most interesting things. If you go in the rabbis' tunnels at the base of the Temple Mount, and you see what they call the Holy of Holies lines up with this East Gate, and it would be right next to it. In fact, the Bible says when you're going to build the temple, you can measure off from the profane place.
That's interesting how the Bible, very, very detailed, and people don't understand that. And when I talk to people, they have no idea how much detail is in this book about things to come and things that have already happened.
Yeah.
This was written way beforehand. In fact, I think I hear the term prehistory, or history written in advance.
Yeah. Well, I just to think about the profane place. I mean, nothing's more profane in my mind to God than this dome.
Yeah, exactly.
But the understanding of the Bible has waned in the latter days here. It's kind of one of those things where I see people say the Bible is boring and annoying to read. And, well, those are people who haven't read it, because if you're reading the Bible, just like the other day, first time, I'm 47 years old, first time I read in Matthew where Jesus is talking to the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees, and he says, they asked his disciples, why does your master eat with publicans and sinners? And Jesus says, stop, I'll answer that. And he tells them that a sick man doesn't need a doctor, but I'm here for the sick.
Right.
And the next line he says, go and learn what that means. Kind of like shoo fly, get out of here and learn what that means before you come back and talk to me.
Jesus really challenged people at their beliefs and what the truth was.
Yeah.
He said, you can believe whatever you want, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What I say matters, what God says matters.
Yeah. Well, it's just like you could not believe in the law of gravity.
No.
If you jump off a building, the law of gravity is going to apply to you.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting to see that. In fact, the Jewish people are so convinced that temple sacrifice is going to begin, they're working on a high-speed train. I think it might even be finished now.
Wow.
And the next time I'm in Israel, I'm going to ride that thing. I'm going to take it. I'll get us a video of it, a time lapse from Ben Gurion Airport right to the Temple Mount.
Make sure you don't eat a big meal before that.
Well, our last thing I want to talk about today comes with that thing we were just talking about, and people in the end times not having a great biblical knowledge.
Yeah.
We see here, this is an interview from Benjamin Thomas. He's interviewing this pastor, Eric Matakis, or I don't remember how to pronounce his name. But this pastor, Eric, here calls the pre-trib rapture a demonic idea.
Yeah, I think that's unbelievable that you would consider somebody a demonic person or from demonic means to say that because I believe in a pre-trib rapture versus a mid-trib or a pre-wrath or a post-trib. That has nothing to do with salvation. That has nothing to do with my brotherhood.
Yeah.
In fact, we were talking the other day, and I have very good friends. Mm-hmm. One that I respect a lot that believes in what they would call a pre-wrath.
Yeah.
And he thinks that we're going to be raptured one day before Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
But he's still a brother in the Lord, and we still treat each other as family.
Yeah, well, and like you said, praise God, the doctrine of salvation is not tied to understanding the rapture.
Oh, yeah.
I know, like you say, several people who believe what they call mid-trib or post-trib, and my reckoning with them is one of these days we're going to figure out who's right, and I hope you guys don't take it hard when I get a good laugh while we're in heaven.
Yep.
So I don't question their salvation. But
wave on the way up.
I'll wave at you on the way up. But this pastor really makes some strange claims, and I really see, we talk about kingdom against kingdom, and do we maybe even see the Lord's kingdom against the Lord's kingdom? Or
Could
maybe
be.
those who call themselves part of the kingdom.
Right, in fighting in the church or something like that, where we're constantly at each other.
Yeah.
And I know several people I've talked to have always said, well, Christians are always so mean and hateful to each other, and I think there is, to an extent, an issue with that.
Yeah, there is.
But I also think that this guy is also bringing up a subject that he thinks that us pre-tribbers are trying to bring things to pass by being a pre-trib. And I think one of the things you were telling me is that he was saying we were inhibiting the gospel from going out.
Yeah. So we're doing this so that we don't have to be patriotic and we don't have to be people who spread the gospel. Well, I think that's nothing further from the truth.
Absolutely not. As a pre-trib person, I believe the rapture could happen now.
Yes.
Or now.
Or now.
Or now. And it is my responsibility as a Christian to fulfill the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And that is to tell everybody I can about Jesus.
Yeah.
To bring people to Jesus and Jesus to people, as J.D. Farag would say.
Yeah.
That is our goal, and what a more constrained way to keep you focused than to understand that it could happen any time and you can't stop.
Yeah, you can't stop it, you can't force it, and you've got to be doing your job. And the other thing I hear is wow, this is something that was talked about only in the last 100 years. Well, if we turn to is it 2 Thessalonians, I think. Let me see if I've got a tab here. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And we see here, what does Paul say about this? We're talking about 100 years. I'm talking about 100 years within Christ.
Right.
What does Paul have to say about it? He says, then we are alive and who remain are caught up with them in the clouds.
Who's we?
I'm thinking he thought the rapture was going to happen.
I think so too. I think Paul thought he would be in the rapture.
So I don't think it's a sinful thing for me to think that I'm going to be caught up in the rapture. Paul obviously thought it too. And it says, it's funny that he goes on to say, comfort one another with these words.
Yeah.
And the other thing I see also is we see the bridegroom of Christ and the bride, which is his church. And of course, Christ is Jewish. Mm-hmm. A Jewish wedding, how does it happen? He leaves his father's home. He finds a bride. He sets a price for the bride. So Christ left heaven,
Right.
found his bride, set the price, which was his death on the cross.
Yep.
Then he returned to his father's home. Remember, he says, I go to prepare a place for you. Well, that's the same thing that happens in a Jewish wedding. I'm going to go prepare a place for you. I will come and get you again. And then the Jewish bride's whole job is to be ready when he comes.
Yep.
No matter what, to be ready. And he comes back, he says, I'm ready. And she jumps to it, and she runs out to meet him. They go to his father's home for a period of 7.
Yep.
They go into their dwelling,
Right.
and then he comes out and presents her to the world.
And then they have a big feast.
I think that pre-trib rapture only makes sense that we're out of here. He doesn't want to beat his bride up through the tribulation. He wants to take her from that tribulation.
Yeah, I think that people think I'm an escapist and that I
Yeah.
think I'm not going to have any tribulation. I really believe before the rapture happens, I'm probably going to suffer
Yeah.
for my belief.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent. I don't know if it'll be just imprisonment or even death.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop us from suffering tribulations here
Sure.
on earth. But it is promised that we would not be under God's wrath, which starts at the 7-year tribulation.
Well, I look at what this pastor has said about people that are pre-trib and not very patriotic, and I don't know very many people that are pre-trib that aren't patriotic.
I agree.
I'm a First Amendment, Second Amendment, Constitution believing Christian. I think that the founding fathers built us on a morally stable ground, which is biblical morality. And man, to say that we're not evangelists, I just got back from India on a missions trip where we had 46 new believers, or actually 56.
Praise the Lord.
And it was amazing. And really, we don't want anyone to be left out from being a believer. It's really simple to be saved.
If you turn to John 3:16, it's probably the most iconic verse in the Bible. And it's one that I've chosen as my favorite verse, and that's just because I can get a bumper sticker anywhere with it on there. Now, it's just because it tells the story so completely. It says, for God so loved the world. That's just not a people group. That's just not elite people or poor people or what people say the elect people. It's everybody.
And it's not the ground, and
It's not the ground, not the trees. It's everybody in the world from past, present to future.
Yeah.
And it says that he sent his only son.
Yeah.
He sent his son down to this earth who took on the body of Jesus and was born on this earth and lived a perfect, sinless life. And he went to the cross and died for you and rose again. All you have to do is put your faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
Not believe he was just a person that was here and I was not just a good person,
Yeah.
but that he took your sin for you and you're dwelling in the promises that he has given you, that you will be saved and you will be in eternity with God and not separated from God in hell. And yes, there is a hell.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a physical hell.
There's an eternal hell, and that makes me sad for people.
I see a lot of times what people I would call miss Christ. That they have the knowledge in their head. They say, and Josephus wrote about the Bible. Josephus wrote about Christ. But Josephus didn't believe it in his heart, I don't think.
No.
So there's an 18-inch gap between what you know and what you believe. And you need to be resting in that and resting in his promises and trusting fully in him. Well, thanks for joining us today. We'll hope to make another episode soon, and we'll get that out as we do. And we'll see you soon.